Hey guys, I'm back here working on the Jag and show you the progress. So I've got the front pretty much aligned. I've got the back's still another issue with the fenders. But right now I got the doors aligned. I had to modify the hinges, spacers, what have you. So today what I'm doing is I'm gapping these doors. And the reason why, as you can see my tape line and my blue ink fluid. So the door gap should be around 1/4 of an inch. And with the front end of the car as far forward as I can get it, it won't slide, it won't move any further forward. And the back is so far back that to get my door gap in the rear, which is correct, this is too tight. So what I'm doing is I ground the edge right here, and then what I did is I used a set of scribes to run off this edge, which is straight. This edge is too, but it's so tight, so I'm gonna have to trim. And then what I did is after I scribed it on the blue ink, on the blue fluid, is I taped my scribe line. And then now that you can see what I'm doing, so as you can see what I'm doing is this is like a fold of the skin, and what you do is you grind it back to get your gap, and then you come back in and TIG weld it and grind it. It's a time-consuming process, but as you can see, the door gap there, and it's starting to flow, and this is where I ground it up in here, and then I'm just working my way down. You don't want to grind it all in one motion because you will separate the skin from the fold, and you might be able to see when I open the door, if you're unfamiliar with it, this is the fold. This is where they folded the skin over. So what I'm doing is, as you can see, it'll separate in some spots it won't. So what I'm doing is I'm grinding a little at a time, and I'm coming in and tacking it. And then I'll grind more, come in and tack it. And I'll do the whole door that way. Then I'll come in and weld the whole door. And what it's gonna do, I'll get my gap, my door gap, exactly what I want. So just stay tuned with me, and I'm just gonna keep plugging away at this edge here, and I'll get it all tacked. And then I'll come back, weld it, grind it, file it, and I'll have a perfectly gapped door. And this is how we do it on all the, I guess you'd say, higher end cars, because the gaps in a certain era were too big. And the 1/4 inch gap is this particular year and model. It was about roughly 1/4 inch. I could tighten it up to make it really beyond belief, but these cars, if you're restoring this car back to stock, they don't want that. They want something that looks like it was original. So as I'm piecing this car together, there's so many things that are not lining up in the essence of this car is going to be a one-off car when I get finished. Like, I'm gapping the door so it fits this opening. If this car was to get wrecked or something like that, if he was to find another door, it would be too tight here. We'd have to do this again. So, and then obviously in the back, I've got a good 1/4 inch gap here, and then this still has to get welded to the rocker, and then I'll have to modify the fender accordingly. And it's just a time-consuming process, but as you can see, I mean, I'm making pretty decent progress. I got the hood on, it's aligned. It's just sitting on there now. I took the hinges off, but the fenders are welded into the cowl. The cowl is at the correct angle with the correct measurement from here down. And then this here, it kind of looks off, but this thing's not screwed down at the bottom, so that'll give me my correct gap. The driver's side, you can kind of see plain as day. See, it's tight in areas, wide in areas. So what I'll do is I'll do the same thing to this door and get that gap correct. But see, in the back, it's right where it needs to be. So I'm just gonna keep chugging away on this, and then I got the front of the car pretty much handled. Work my way to here because this is where the doors hinge. As you can see, I got in all the seal plates. and they're in, and all the correct shims in the door to where it shuts real nice. So what I'm gonna do is I'll gap these doors and I'm gonna start working back. Because of the wood floor in the front, the back of the car is not bolted or welded in yet. So I wanna get both doors done, get both doors latched. I could slide the rear section around, get it tightened down, then I'll come in and I'll modify these fenders accordingly. I know I've already done work on them. This side lines up pretty well. The other side I've got to kind of tweak. So it could just be something, I built it pretty much off what I had, but that doesn't mean it's right because I never had the firewall. Everything's kind of tied into the firewall since the front fenders are welded to the firewall. And since we received this firewall from England, there's no telling it. It is man-made, but like right in here, the door is a little low right here where my black mark is. It should be up there in that crevice, like on the other side. So there's just some things that I'm gonna have to play with, but that could have been the way factory was. So you guys stick with me, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna try to get these doors knocked out, and I'll show you the finished product of basically gapping the doors. And this is what we do on a lot of the high-end vehicles around here, you know, that if it comes in here and it's going to a show quality or something like that, we try to make the gaps critical. And on cars like this that have been totally cut apart, there's nothing I can do right there, because this came factory as the front of the door or the A-pillar edge. So that is what it is. You can't change that, because then you're gonna come back here into the fender and it's gonna screw everything up, which means I'd have to cut the cowl, cut the fender. But the problem is behind that sill plate, that is the hinge, the factory hinge where it bolts up and everything, as you can see. So this can't go any further back because there's inner structure in there. So you can't move the fender, which most people's like, oh, I can move the fender. It's easier to grind the door. As you can see, I have a lip here, the folded edge. I can grind this back and you will never notice, even if I take a 16th off. But it's gonna open up my gap here, because I've already got a 16th, or I've already got a 3/16 gap or an 1/8 inch gap. You put a 16th in there and it's gonna get me right to where I need to be. So this is the progress on the Jag. I'm hoping to get the doors knocked out and moved on to the fenders later this week, but it's getting close. It's back to a car. I've got the fenders on and everything's starting to look more like a car again. So progress on the Jag, and I'm gonna keep moving and see what we can do to get this car wrapped up. Stay tuned and I'll have some more coverage of that edge of a fender. So I got it all done back on the gapping project. And as you can see, it's a lot cleaner line, and I moved it back. So I've got my pretty true 1/4 inch gap. I've still got to do right down in there. There's some rust on the outer door skin I've got to repair, but from basically that point up, it all looks really good. So, and then as you can see, so it's just, you can MIG weld it. The problem with MIG weld is it's gonna burn too much into the skin because you're welding on the edge, and it can be done, but it's gonna be more grinding. I like to TIG weld it, and then what I come in and do is I grind it, and you can see once I take the door off, I can clean up this, you know, the downward hang of the weld, and it'll look like I never touched it. But on the outside surface, see if I can get down in there. You can kind of see the way the weld, the back side of the weld on that other piece is wavy. I'll go in and clean that up. But as you can see, when the door's shut, the gap is pretty on point to what it needs to be. So that's what I'm doing today, is gapping doors. So I got this one side done, and I'll move on to the driver's side. So basically from the front to the back, or the B pillar, or the back of the door, will be pretty much complete. And then I could start messing with the fenders and getting that same gap in the back of the door. Then I know that this is gonna be the correct motion. And another thing I wanted to let you guys know is sometimes when you weld this, since it's a lip that's hanging off the edge, it tends to roll back, so the door will roll off. So what I'll do is when I take this door off to clean up the back side, is I'll put the dolly on this side and I'll hammer that edge back straight with the door so it's not falling off. Because what's gonna happen is if you don't do that and you go to body work it, it's gonna show that the door is rolling in here and you're gonna have to put Bondo on the edge. And I don't like putting Bondo on the edge. I'd rather have metal, primer, and then Bondo back here if you have to use a little bit of filler. But if you put Bondo on the edge and when you're aligning the door and it gets real close, per se, after it's painted, it's a likelihood that 100% that Bondo, if it's a decent thickness, even a 1/16, all it's got to do is catch an edge and it'll chip your paint. So if you can, try to just get your metal back flush to where your panels are meeting. And then if you have to, is Bondo, I try to do about a 1/4 inch back if I have to put Bondo, so it's a bare metal edge sitting there. But as you can see, the gap is pretty consistent and it's pretty smooth. And that's the way it needs to be, and that's the way I like them to be. So you could see the gap, it's perfectly true. Onto the other side we go. But hope you guys like this video of what I'm doing today. It's tedious, it's time consuming, but hey, someone's got to do it. So if you're not a subscriber, click the link below. But I hope you enjoyed this video on gapping doors. We do this on all sorts of cars. I did it on that 55 Cadillac that we took to Detroit. It can be painstakingly a chore. This hinge system is pretty unique. It's just solid and it's pretty basic. But like on that Cadillac, when you have moving parts inside of it and stuff like that, believe it or not, you take the door off, you clean it up, you put it back on, and the door gap's off again. So it's gonna take time, but this particular car with the style of the hinge and stuff, with a bolt, with a bushing in it, it's pretty plain Jane. It can't go anywhere. But I've got the edge pretty straight. I got my spacers in there to move the door front to back, and I have them marked. So hope you like this video on gapping doors. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me through my social media websites, or you could even phone me. It's on my website. I think it's even on social media, Facebook, etc. But hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hope to see some of you guys putting more detail into some of these cars like this per se. Gapping doors is crucial when you start getting into the high-end show cars. So I'm gonna get on the other side and start grinding and welding again. So I'll see you guys later.